How many victims we have so far?
We have 16 folks.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I would like to, welcome all of you to part one of this fun Tin Mountain Energy Team program on emergency preparedness, focusing on backup electric power. Tonight, Russ Lanoie of Rural Home Technology is going to really focus on sort of what uses electric power and things to consider. And including, we have on our website, which Russ will describe, some checklists that for you to go through and really think about your own home's specific needs, that will then really help guide next week's program, where we'll have a few industry professionals on, and we'll get, we'll sort of dive into generators and backup battery power options and weighing sort of the pros and cons and figuring out what might be the best choices for you. Before I hand things over to Mr. Lanoie, I do just want to take a moment to thank our Nature Program Series sponsors, Hancock Lumber and Ragged Mountain Equipment. And also, specifically with this program, the Tin Mountain Energy Team and the work that they do in, really sharing, helping to educate our, the Washington Valley with, some of the renewable energy initiatives and efforts that are out there. Again, I said this is part one. Part two is the same time next week, so 7 o'clock on the 22nd. We will be doing that. We also are recording this program, so if you need to go back and double check something that was said, or if you have to duck out, then you will be able to access this hopefully tomorrow, if not, by the weekend or Monday on Tin Mountain's YouTube channel. If this is the first time that you are joining us for a remote program, or you haven't been with us in a while, just a reminder that the best ways to interact and ask questions are utilizing the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. If you type into that, I will be monitoring that. If you put your question in there, if it's an immediate clarifying question, I've got no problem interrupting Mr. Lanoie and asking him that. If not, I will hold it and I will run through those questions at the end of the program. At the end, you can also, most of you were, I think it's set up that everyone was muted by default upon entry. At the end, you can certainly manually unmute yourself and ask questions directly of Russ. And before I hand it over, the last thing I will say is that if you have been enjoying Tin Mountain's virtual programs, we would encourage you that if you are in a position to support them, the best way that you can support our programming is to become a member, which you can do right from our website. You can also just donate to our Nature Program Series. If you come to a few of them right on our website, on the Support Us page, there is an option to donate, $5 or $10 to our Nature Program Series to help us continue these programs. So, we certainly appreciate everyone's support. And with that, I will hand things over to Mr. Lanoie.
He was my father.
Oh, sorry.
Even the junior program kids call me Russ. Please. I'm just holding this up at the beginning, and this has a significance to this program because, yeah. You see better now, Dave? B&M baked beans from Portland.
Vegetarian B&M beans.
You betcha. There's a significance, there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about it at the end, and even more next week. What qualifies me to do this? Well, not a whole lot, except for the fact that your tax dollars put me through 18 weeks of intensive aircraft electrical training back in the middle of the last century, just about the time Ben Franklin was done with his experiments. So I do have a little background in electricity, but not residential. That's why I hire an electrician now, and he straightens out all the things I did wrong. Anybody remember this? 1988. Those are some of the pictures I took Tasker Hill Road, just above my house. We lost power for about 4 hours. Other people were without power for days. I drove up and down the street with my loader, picking up poles, wires, and trees and putting them on the side of the road so the school bus could get through. That's our kids playing cards by candlelight. Some people's lights just flickered. Others were weeks without, particularly those people on a long dead-end road, only 1 or 2 houses on the road. It took a long time for power to be restored there. Now, there are really only 3 things that we absolutely need electricity for: communication, controls, and computation. Everything else can be done some other way. Yes, even refrigeration can be done with gas. Those are the only things we absolutely need electricity for. However, a short list of all the things we've come to use electricity for and expect it to be there when we flip the light on, the switch on. Heaters, lights, refrigerator, freezer, well pumps, water heaters, heat tapes for roofing or for roofs or for plumbing. People that have their own wells often have heat tapes on their plumbing and their wells. Septic system pumps up to the septic tank, or from the septic tank to the leach field, or even from in the house up to the septic tank, depending upon the configuration. Sump pumps for basement dewatering, kitchen stoves, microwaves, garbage disposal, dishwasher, vent fans, computers, cordless telephones, clothes dryers, clothes washers, dryers, and gas dryers still need electricity. Air conditioners, vacuum, TVs, security cameras, power tools, garage door opener, EV, electric vehicle car chargers, that's something new, reasonably new, medical devices, although it's down on the list, is probably one of the most important, wireless or wired pet fence, again, security cameras, and can opener, and that's where the beans come in. Now this young lady here, I didn't get approval from her mother to put her picture on here, and I think her mother just left the screen here. This is my pedal-powered shower head display that we use every year. Nora, do you think I could get a what do you call it, a release from this young lady's mother to use her picture here?
Definitely not.
Okay, this is Nora's daughter. At the Funergy Festival, people trying this quickly learn how much electricity does for us for really a minimum amount of cost. You pedal this thing for a while and you realize you get a sweat and you need a shower. We take it all for granted. I think most of us probably in a power outage go around, turn on all these things and forget that they're on, and when the power comes back on, every motor in the house starts running. Here's an important point. Even if you have a PV system, photovoltaics, you make your own electricity, when the grid goes down, you go down. You cannot use those photovoltaics to produce electricity for your house when the grid goes down. And that's because everything gets locked out, so you can't possibly send power back out onto the grid and injure or kill alignment. Now, coincidentally, the reason that we're doing this series is because one day, a couple of months ago, I got an email from Lori, our executive director, and Nelson, the building and grounds, that they were thinking about a backup system for the building, which makes a lot of sense here. And then about an hour later, I get an email from Nora saying, what should be our next program? We said, well, gee, emergency power, particularly in this day and age where so many people are going solar, and even though they have solar, they don't have electricity if the solar goes down. Now, there are some ways around that, and we'll talk about that a little more towards the end and much more next week. Sources of backup power. Now, a lot of you use a UPS, not the kind that delivers Amazon packages, but uninterruptible power supplies. You can buy them at Walmart, at Staples, and you plug your computer into it. That powers a power strip to my computer, and this actually powers the phone answerer. So, which I'm at my advanced age now and employment status, of thinking about unplugging so I don't have to answer the phone anymore, but still, that will keep the phone recorder operating if you do have a power outage for a while. And these UPSs come in different sizes. And you know, if you were in one of these big air-conditioned places that that house all of the different technology that we have now, this thing would be, you know, half the size of a house, because it would be there to provide a constant source of full sine wave, clean power for all of the electronic things that we have come to expect. 12 volt to 110 volt inverters. Now there are a lot of these. You can plug them. I had a small one. I think I gave it away to one of the kids. But this would plug into your cigarette lighter and give you 110 volts, so that you could plug in a few things. Certainly not your refrigerator, freezer, and certainly not all at the same time, but you might charge your phone or some of those things. Here's a 1,000 amp inverter. Now this is my diesel 1-ton truck. This has 2 big batteries and a real strong alternator. This is a 1,000 watt inverter that I rigged up with quick disconnects to my truck battery. So in a power outage, which we almost never have where we're situated, this can be plugged in here, and then I've got a couple of plugs right there that I can plug things in from my house, not to exceed the 1,000 watt capacity. That's what that 1,000 watt means. That will produce 1,000 watts, and each of the things that you have in your house, we'll talk about later, have a wattage rating, and you need to know that when you start figuring out what you need for backup power. Now, I'd kind of forgotten about this and stumbled across this and putting this together. There are an awful lot of people now with small compact diesel tractors that have a power takeoff. And this is a very delightful way to be able to use that power takeoff in a power outage. My guess is that you would set your PTO at 540 RPM, which is the typical thing, and that was good. That would power your generator, and depending upon how big this generator is, it could power your house. Even Gravely tractors, years ago, I remember they had a generator PTO, but this would be a reasonable. It would eliminate the need to have a separate engine to run a generator, and this would give you another reason to go out and buy a nice Kubota BX22 or similar. Maybe it could even be green. Now, we have a friend we were talking with a while ago, and he was showing us his motorhome, and he talked about his generator. I said, gee, you could use that to power your house in a power outage. There was a pause, and he said, I just went and bought a generator. I never thought of it. This particular generator is 3,200 watts. So this would power several things in a house. This is in a small motorhome. This actually happens to be a diesel generator, which runs off of the fuel tank, the same fuel tank that the engine runs off of. So with I forget how big the fuel tank is on that, but it would give many, many, many hours of usage, and it could be even because the fuel is remote. The fuel tank could be filled up without any danger of doing any harm, because this is on the other side of the vehicle and it's diesel, and that doesn't burn up like gas does. So you could actually add more diesel to the fuel tank to be able to keep this thing running steady if you had some critical loads that you needed. Now the way these things work is the generator actually powers a box on the side of the motorhome. There's this box here, and there's an electrical box inside with a 30 amp plug in it. That's why it looks funny. It's slotted. That's a 30 amp plug. You would probably most likely use this with an extension cord that would have conventional 110 volt plugs with the 2 straight prongs and the ground. But you could power several things from this generator just by plugging this in. The generator in the motorhome energizes this box. The motorhome either plugs into this or it plugs into what's called shore power. When you go to a campground that has plug-in power, this would plug in to their power instead of the generator. So there's a lot of these things around, and they're they could be quite useful, and it'd be good to exercise a generator, especially in the middle of the winter. Toyota pickups have for years, I have an 05 Toyota, and it has an outlet in the back corner. My daughter told me it doesn't work anymore, but I'm not sure she was doing it right. There's a switch on the dashboard that energizes this. And coincidentally, I had a Pontiac Vibe that had power on the dashboard, and the Pontiac Vibe was actually a Toyota Matrix in disguise, so they probably shared some technology there. But if you remember the ad on TV a few years ago of the guy playing some rock and roll on the sidewalk with his amp plugged into to his dashboard, that's the same technology. Again, this just would not give you a whole lot of power, but it might be able to power some things in an emergency. Now here's something quite new, power from your Prius. Any of you who read the Green Energy Times regularly would have seen this article in this latest issue. There's one of the contributors to the Green Energy Times apparently came up with this design, and then he pulled the plug on it for a little while, and now it's back again, and it's called this convertant. It's a 3 kilowatt plug out kit. I think the name of his organization is Plug Out Power. If any of you have an electric vehicle, you can go to Plug Out Power and see what they have. Whether this will work in conjunction with your solar system or not, I don't know as yet. Maybe I can find out between now and next week. If somebody else knows and can fill me in on that, Kim, we might be able to learn a little more. But there are batteries in your some pretty good sized batteries in your electric vehicle, and those batteries could power quite a bit in your home, and you could run the vehicle to charge the batteries. So again, depending upon what your needs are, this may be a fairly inexpensive way to provide yourself with some backup power. Now we get into the portable generators. I have one of these. It's a very quiet, nice running little generator. They cost about $1,000 or so. I think the prices may be coming down because there's competition, but Honda has always been the best. This is what you typically see in a campground. You'll hear one of these things humming at the appropriate hours that they allow you to run these things, and you just hear this little hum out behind somebody's tent. This is a 2200 watt generator, and I've used this. We bought this particularly when my father-in-law was living with us, and we needed backup power because he'd never been in an area that was completely dark at night. And with his dementia, we thought it would probably be a good idea to have some lights and maybe some heat for him. So this is very, very simple, very light to move around, and you plug stuff right in directly. And it also has 12 volt if you needed to charge a car battery or something. Here's another small generator from a company that's not as well known as Honda, but better known in the generator field, Generac. This is a 1700 watt generator. Although they say GP 2200, I think that might be the startup watts. And this is fairly inexpensive, $680. Again, this would probably power your freezer and one or two other things, and you could switch stuff around in the house because you don't have to run a freezer continually. And typically when we lose power in the middle of the winter, when we lost power in 98, the only person that asked to borrow my generator did it to power his freezer on his porch. I still haven't figured out why. It was January. Now here's a little bit bigger generator, 8,125 watts, still a portable generator. And some of these things are also welders, I suppose. This still portable, can be moved around, place where you need. My son called me. Actually, I talked to my son about a week ago about this project. He was calling me in the dark because they'd lost power. He lives just north of Albany in New York, and they lose power regularly because, as it turns out, their infrastructure is probably among the oldest in the world, because that's pretty much where Edison started stuff up in Schenectady. They lose power all the time. He called me the day he bought his house. from the lumber company. He said, there's one generator left. He says, should I buy it? I said, yes. It was Hurricane Sandy, and he's had the opportunity to use it several times. Here's a little bit bigger generator. His would be on the smaller end of these portable generators. He has to take it out of the garage to plug things in one by one in his case. This is a 5,000 watt diesel generator. Now, the fact that it's diesel makes it a whole lot more money, but it runs a lot longer. It used to be a cheaper fuel. Actually, you could use off-road, I suppose, in this. Off-road diesel is cheaper than on-road diesel because you're not paying the taxes. Diesel is probably, I hadn't thought about this, but gasoline now, as we all know, that's been adulterated with ethanol. It destroys small engines unless you put an additive in it, which I do for all of my engines. Somebody told me about it years ago, and I'd never heard of a problem with it. And about a week later, I started having a problem with all of my small engines because I didn't have one of the stable or Startron additives to the gasoline. Diesel, you would not need that sort of an additive. I'm not sure whether the fuel would stay good forever or not. Probably not, because it tends to actually has a tendency to grow things in it. So you really need to run these things once in a while, which is one of the disadvantages of a generator against the batteries that we'll be talking about a little later on. Now here's a built-in generator. This is the kind that you set it and forget it. Your power goes out and this pops back on a few seconds later. What's happening in that time is the power drops out and a switch notices that the power is out and it turns the generator on, but it does not backfeed into the grid because that would be dangerous. You could kill a lineman on a pole. So that's what happens in that few seconds that the power goes out and then comes back on. Now here's probably the biggest I've ever seen. Calling this a home backup generator. I'd like to see the home. Actually, we probably have some of those up on top of some of our hills. $30,699. That's probably doesn't even. No, it doesn't include the transfer switch and installation. But I suppose when you spend that much, what's a few extra $1,000? I don't think we have many of those around. Now, just to be fair, everything we looked at has been Generac. Any one of you that's had a lawnmower in the last 50 years has probably had a Briggs & Stratton engine on it. So here's a Briggs & Stratton generator, a 12 kW generator, a standby generator, and this would be a hardwired generator, that's the kind that you would set and forget. We're going to talk much more about these next week as we compare portable generators with whole house generators or the permanently installed generators versus batteries. Batteries are coming on strong. I learned a little bit about batteries, I think, from the Green Energy Times, and darned if like the next day or the next evening, there was an ad on television for Generac for their battery backup system. So this is something new that's coming on strong, and it has some distinct advantages. Kim will be talking a whole lot more about those next week. I'm going to just cover them a little bit tonight. For a long time, we've used batteries as backup for those houses that were not connected to the grid. That was the only way they could have their power overnight. Just like your car. You know, your car has a battery. In the daytime, you charge up the battery. At night, you can turn the lights on even without the engine running. You don't want to leave the lights on too long, you'll end up with a dead battery because these are not designed. The car battery is entirely different than these type of batteries. Most of these batteries are what's called a deep cycle. It's the same type you would have in a motorhome, the same type that's used for solar. They're allowed to be drawn way, way, way down without destroying them. Car batteries are not designed to do that. They're designed to be able to be used and charge up and then go off and then use up a little bit. And if they get flattened too many times, as I found out leaving the lights on in my truck, you end up with new batteries. This, I believe, was Nancy Ray Mallory's storage system for her PVs. She's the one who produces the Green Energy Times, and I believe she had these batteries for sale because she was switching to a newer style of batteries. So she was selling these. I guess they still had some life left in them, but that was not the whole battery bank. I don't remember how many more there were, but it's a pretty serious commitment when you try and power your whole house. That's why grid-tied solar is so much more cost effective, because you don't have batteries. You power into the grid, power back out of the grid as you need it. With a battery backup system, you have to have some substantial storage. Now here's the new kid on the block. You've all heard of Elon Musk. This is his power wall, so-called. Again, I just learned about these things recently through the Green Energy Times and beginning to see them in other places also. This is, okay, that's the power wall. This is the Generac equivalent, Generac's PWR cell. This is a stack of batteries that can be powered either from the grid or from solar, or if the grid goes down, it would work in conjunction with solar, and it would allow you to use your solar array when the grid is down. So you'd be powering up the batteries in the daytime and pulling back out of the batteries at night. Some of the distinct advantages of batteries is you don't have to have a fuel that's going to go stale on you if you don't use it. You don't have to exercise a generator. You don't have to change the oil in a generator. And like somebody who I hope is watching tonight, you don't have the generator die on you after 20 years, Betsy. This is a real practical alternative. I guess the big question is now, how costly are these things? But there's one factor here that is going to help reduce the cost of this, and I just learned about this also. I think this was from the Green Energy Times, and I'm going to read this. Demand response for home battery storage. Earn rewards and lower carbon emissions by enrolling your home battery storage system in Eversource's connected solutions. Now, I'm going to say that probably a majority of you are on Eversource. We have not had any feedback from the co-op as to whether they're doing a program like this or not yet, but it's coming. It's bound to come, as you'll understand a little more about it. Home batteries can help you store clean energy generated by a home solar system, or simply provide backup energy in case you need it. By enrolling in the Connected Solutions Demand Response Program, you will be rewarded financially for allowing Eversource to use the energy stored in your battery at times of high demand. Incentives for home batteries are based on the average kilowatt used per event, averaged over the season. All events will occur between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. That's when everybody comes home and turns the microwave and the air conditioning in the summertime. And this is supposedly, this is, I think, Nora, we saw June to September. You will be notified before any event, and if there's an extreme weather event in the forecast, we will not draw energy from your battery. This is as we're starting to get closer and closer to a smart grid, where we can pull from the grid when we need it, but if we've got storage that the grid can pull from, I mean, I've heard figures as high as 100 times the base rate that the utilities pay for power at times of extremely high demand. This is when the jet engine generators start up and all that, costing them a fortune for the power for those few peaks. So as more and more people have these batteries, they're able to pull out of them at those peak times and cut down on the demand for that really, really high cost energy. So this is happening now. I don't know how many places how many places in New Hampshire have it. There is a place, Liberty Utilities, on the other side of the state. I don't know how many. Nora, do you remember how many they've done over there?
I don't remember how many Liberty have, but obviously Heather will be able to talk more about that next week.
Right, but they've done somewhat of a pilot program over there to show the practicality of doing this, and that's with Liberty Utilities rather than Eversource. So next week's session will compare features and benefits of fossil fuel generators, which would be gasoline, propane, and diesel, versus the new battery backup systems. Now, your homework for the week is to download this checklist from the Tin Mountain website. Put a little link in the printer, and here's what you'll need to do with it. You want to get a head start. What you'll need for backup power. This is a process you really have to go through to figure what you're going to need for backup power, unless you just buy a small generator and figure, well, I'll plug the freezer in and then I'll plug the heater in or whatever. But if you're going to really look at what your absolute needs are and something and making it simple for somebody. I was in Rock House Development this summer when we lost power, and I saw a young lady trying to start her generator that her husband had left for her, and she was struggling with a little kid watching, and I walked over and turned the switch on and pulled the handle once. And you need to have some steps ironed out for somebody who's not familiar with the generator, a portable generator, for them to understand what they need to do to make this work. There was a Tin Mountain member who, I think it was the same power outage, plugged it in and something went poof. I did somewhat the same thing in spite of my electrical training years ago. I did something stupid, and I've learned from it. Now, hopefully I'll pass that knowledge on. Every appliance, or virtually every appliance, has a data plate. That you can usually find the amount of kilowatts that it draws. Write them down into the space provided after each appliance on the sheet downloaded. High priority in the left, less priority in the middle, and don't bother with the non-essential ones. So here we go. Microwave. Look inside the door of the microwave, and here it says KW 1.45. What does that mean? Kilowatts. 1.45 kilowatts. Now a kilowatt is 1,000 watts. So we multiply that by 1,000. All we're doing is moving the decimal point in this case, and then we get 1,000 watts. We're going to put that in here because we figure the microwave is essential, which it probably is as good a way of preparing food in an outage as anything, unless you happen to have a gas stove. But that's quick and easy. And we're going to write that in here. What we're looking for as we go through this is to have a total of all these things so you know how big a generator you need. Now here's a high efficiency gas furnace that we installed years ago. It uses one of those 3 C's for controls, but it also uses electricity to circulate the heat. Very efficient, like 90 to 95% efficient. What comes out of it is basically cool air and water vapor. You don't see smoke. That's why these new high efficiency furnaces use a PVC pipe going out through a wall instead of a metal or brick chimney going up through the roof. This has a data plate. Now in this case it says total amps is less than 20 amps, but I'm going to figure it at 20 amps just to be safe. At 115 volt, which is typical house power, and 110 volts times 20 amps is 2,200 watts, or 2.2 kilowatts. We're going to use the 220 watts, 2,200 watts, and put that. I forgot to put it on the chart. Here's a freezer. Now this is interesting. This freezer only draws 5 amps, which is 575 watts. It draws a lot less than a microwave. But keep in mind, you're using the microwave for short bursts. This is on all the time, and these things have become a whole lot more efficient. If you've got a 15-year-old refrigerator, take it to the dump and get a new one because it'll pay for itself in energy savings. Okay, here's our emergency power backup checklist. I put a couple of things in here. We're going to go down through all this and figure all the things that we need. And remember, some appliances, as this is a wood burn, fake wood stove. It's a Yodel stove that burns gas. This does not need electricity to operate. So this is in our house. This can be used in our house to provide heat, along with 2 wood stoves and a backup generator. But this would provide heat in the event of a power outage because it does not need electricity to operate. While you are at all this, this checklist was provided by Generac a very helpful list of all the things you should have on hand for a power outage. Next week's session is going to be fossil fuel generators versus battery backup systems. And we will have some other people, so you don't have to listen to me drone on. Now, this is where the can of beans comes in. We have an electric can opener, but we also have one of these because this can of beans, Nora's got B&M baked beans too. This can of beans ain't gonna do you no good if you've got a microwave or anything else, if you can't get it open. So an old manual can opener, very, very helpful under those conditions. Questions? And I'll speak at once.
Yeah, so Russ, thank you for that. I wanted to jump in, and I'm going to actually work backward through some of these Zoom chats because someone asked. I did just put a link to the page on our website that has that checklist on it. There are actually links to 2 PDF documents on that page. One of them is the electric load checklist that Russ was just walking through. The other one actually that just the overall emergency preparedness checklist that was one of the previous slides. So both of those are on our website. If you go to our homepage, and at the bottom there are, so if you go to programs and events and go to energy team, there'll be a link that takes you there. If you go just on our homepage at the bottom, there is a little news tile that says 2-part energy service. That's energy program. That's actually where those links are both housed. And if you are having difficulty, please feel free just to email me and I will get those documents to you. So
Or I can. I'll be happy to.
Yeah, but we have them. And so again, yes, that Tin Mountain the link is right in the chat feature. Russ, there was a question that came in the chat box about the gas additive that you were talking about for small engines. Can you share sort of what that?
Marine stable or Startron.
All right, yeah, so.
Or there's a place in Freedom, I don't know if they always have it, that you can buy regular unleaded gas without ethanol, or several people go to the airport in Freiburg and use aviation gas, which if it's a string trimmer or something like that, you're not using a whole lot of gas, but aviation gas does not have ethanol.
Okay.
Ethanol just raises hell with engines.
Someone just shared in the feature that, yes, so Good Gas Additive Stable, that Wally World, Lucy Hardware, and Paris Farmer Union, you should be able to
Napa.
At all of those.
Yeah. Maybe even Hannaford, I'm not sure. There's a lot of stuff there. What else you got?
I've got that Tractor PTO Power, also powers milking parlors. Matt Holmbook, yeah, 50, that they've been doing that for over 50 years.
Yep.
I just remember when I was a kid that the neighbors had that capability, yeah. So I'd actually thought about a Tractor PTO, but decided not to. I think also there is a gas station in Bartlett that has a premium with no ethanol in it as well.
Really?
Yeah. Someone just said, I think that Patches, yeah, and
yeah, that's the place.
Has ethanol-free gas.
Yeah, the ethanol just raises hell with small engines. It's not as bad in a car because the cars are built more for it nowadays, but it rots out. It just does a lot of bad stuff. So the additive seems to make up for it. It doesn't take very much. It doesn't cost very much to use. But Startron or Marine Stable is the I think is the better of the 2 stables. STABIL.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Laura, you ready to sign up?
Yeah, I'm really curious about the difference between the 2 and what the cost is going to be for a battery backup system.
Don't you think we can maybe get a grant?
I mean, it's a possibility for sure. I just, I would we need to figure out, I've been wondering what the wattage, what you would need to run the heating system. I'm mostly concerned about the heating system at the center in the winter. We've been lucky and never had a power outage until this summer, and thankfully it was this summer. But if that had been the winter, we were out for 3 days, and that would have been bad.
Yeah.
So,
Because
anyway.
I think even your wood boiler needs electricity to be able to circulate.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So I've always been frustrated by the fact that we have all these wonderful solar panels, and yet when the electricity goes out, the electricity's out. There's nothing. So, and I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could even, if they were really expensive, that you could have a battery backup that ran XYZ and, a generator that ran the rest or whatever. I don't have, I mean, can you give me any idea of what a battery backup would cost?
You gotta wait till next week to find these things out.
Yeah, I have to make it. Okay. I just remember talking.
Two-part program.
Yeah, I just remember talking to Kim a number of years ago, and I thought they were like, totally out of the question. They were that expensive.
And probably years ago they were. They have, as Kim Bowker will, we'll go over next week, they've, come leaps and bounds and just are much more in the game and much, a much more reasonable option at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Lori, if the heater is the main option, let's just talk offline about just how much that blower draws, and we'll figure it out. And to your point, there are ways to either do a combination, some batteries, maybe a smaller generator, or there are also things we can do now to tap into your existing PV system that weren't available a few years ago. But that key number is like how much electricity that blower is going to draw.
Right. So Russ, you'd be able to figure that out?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we could do that. It's, by the way, Kim, it's not a blower. It's a circulator. It's
Sorry. Or
It's
whatever.
radiant floor heat. So yeah, I mean, you're pushing water around. I mean, it seems like it probably takes a fair amount of energy.
Yeah. So that's what we'll have to figure out. And it might be, it's going to be an interesting exercise if nothing else, because that's exactly what Russ is talking about with this worksheet here.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. So yeah.
Nora, there's a job for us next week.
Yeah, there we go. But although Russ, you're not off the hook yet, because there was, leave it to Mary Ann to put you to task. Yeah, so
she always keeps me on the straight and narrow.
I know. So we're circling back to those 3 C's. So one of them, that last one was communication. Can you give some guidance for wattage needs for computers and cell phones?
Small, probably a UPS for a computer and a cell phone would probably be all you need. Or you plug it into your car when you're driving. Your outlet. You can charge your car. Charge your phone. Those are very small. I mean, those little things. It's so much different than a microwave that's using energy to create a different type of energy. You're doing with electricity what you would have done with coal, wood, oil, elephant dung, or whatever we've used over the centuries to heat stuff up with. But yeah, they're minimal. I think if you look at them. Now, I haven't looked at any one of those things, but you'll find the wattage on them, and it's really, really minimal. What's maybe as critical as anything is that a lot of those things require a clean signal in order to operate. Meaning, if you go back to your trigonometry, that sine wave for AC needs to be very smooth, or it can raise hell with electronics. So that's that could be an issue. But I don't think it's anything you'd have to worry about. Anything that you're going to buy is going to be set up. If it's got a USB plug to plug into, most new vehicles have a USB outlet on them, at least one, if not several, and you can plug stuff into that. It's not going to take much. So.
All right, great. Are there any other questions for Russ?
Anything I forgot on the list?
Yeah. Well, as I said, if you have trouble finding those documents, please let us know. The link's sort of buried in the chat, but I am happy to send it out or share with folks as well. Yes. Oh, and so again, sort of thinking about, as we go through this, thinking about, those of us that were without power for 2 to 3 days, and thinking about what power loads are for how you can power those critical items for 3 or 4 days if need be, and not just necessarily 6 or 7 hours.
Don't forget that Tin Mountain has a tractor with a PTO, and probably Matt could help you hook that up. You get a generator off the PTO. Can you, Matt?
Now we can milk cows in the barn, Matt.
Yeah.
that
Although Matt
wasn't
also,
me. That was the neighbor.
Oh, okay. I was envisioning you. Right.
So Russ, one more thing that Matt just put in there. Can you talk about well pumps?
Just not to forget that it's highly valuable to have the well pump working, so you're not without water.
Yeah, and that is generally if it's a submersible pump like yours is, and dug the well, you'll need 220 volts. So you're not going to use a UPS or something like that. You're going to need a generator that will produce 220 volts as well as 110, because that is a 220 volt appliance. 220 volts is much more efficient, which is why deep well pumps are generally 220 volts, because you each leg pushing and pulling. But that's a consideration. One of the things we'll be getting into, and I've learned a lot this week. Again, I've a background in electricity, courtesy of the Air Force, but a lot of this technology is a whole lot newer than the airplanes that we worked on in the National Guard. I wondered just how they did these generator transfer switches and all that stuff, setting up so that you could plug your generator in to an outlet on the wall, or an inlet on the wall, I should say, and have all that go to all of your critical loads. And I finally figured out how that's done, and I've got some good slides, particularly courtesy of this old house, to show how that is all done. It's not so that anybody can go do it themselves, but it's to give people an idea of what needs to be done. And there probably are some people that are tuned in that are qualified to do that themselves, or do like I do with my electrician. I do the rough stuff, and he does the hookup so that he knows things are right. Those are some of the things that we'll address next week, that are fairly critical as you're choosing a generator system. Again, the simplest thing is to have a small generator on wheels that you pull out in the middle of the driveway, far away from the house, so that you can't kill anybody. If you pay attention to what's happened with some of these disasters recently, more people have been killed by their generators than by the disaster itself, by misusing the generators. So it's very critical that you use the generator correctly, because it does produce carbon monoxide. The simplest thing is you run an extension cord from the refrigerator out to the generator. You run an extension cord from your heater out to the generator. I ran an extension cord years ago from the heater in the mobile home out to the generator, not realizing the fact that all I was doing was operating the burner itself and not the heat circulator. And by the time I realized what was happening, the heat circulator had melted some of the insulation, and I had to do a little bit of repair work. Now I have the circulator on a plug also, so I can plug both of those things and run that system from a remote generator, whether it be a generator or whether it be the alternator hooked on my tractor, or any one of those other options. So there's a lot of things to consider.
Oh, so one more question, that aside from a well pump and, probably an electric oven or dryer, is there anything else that is likely to be sort of on that, the 220 or 240 volt? 220?
Your dryer would be 220, 240.
So what else would have those big loads besides,
Yep, electric oven. I mean, electric oven, electric burners. Those are virtually always 220. I mean, you look at the plug on those things and see how big they are, and say, yeah,
Right.
that's set up to draw a lot of power. So yeah, those would be high demand items. That's why a lot of people cook on their wood stove when there's a power outage, because they just don't have the capacity to generate enough power to power an electric stove. Those would be the high demand thing. I mean, just look down the list here. Sump pump, that's probably 110 and not that big. Refrigerators, we looked at a fairly small demand. Garbage disposal, I don't think I'd be using that anyway. Medical devices, now that's kind of open-ended. There could be a lot of different options that medical devices would use, and that's the kind of thing you need to talk with an electrician about and say, we really need to have this working all the time. So what do we, how can we do that and make it safe and fail safe? So heat tapes have a fairly high demand for roofs or for plumbing. The trick that everybody used 50 years ago for keeping if the pump was down by the well somehow, they had a 100-watt light bulb in there, or even a 60-watt light bulb would generate enough heat to keep that from freezing. Yeah. Now with an LED light, you need something different, so you probably have heat tapes. I had an instance once years ago where somebody we all know from the valley had insulated under the modular house the water coming in from the town, but they forgot to put a heat source in there. So it froze. So I had to go put heat tapes around it. But those modern heat tapes don't draw a whole lot. But they do need, again, that's one of those things, if you're going to be without power for several days and it's really cold in the winter, that may be one of those things you want to keep going so that you don't freeze and bust your water lines. So those are a consideration. If your water comes up in the middle of the house someplace, and your pump is down inside the well, you probably don't have anything to worry about. Does that help?
Yep.
It's just one disaster after another are waiting to happen.
Yep.
I know, I'm terrified.
No, winter.
Well, and Russ, regarding medical devices too, they can use a surprising amount of power, and also they have to run 24 hours a lot of times if it's an oxygen machine or something like that. Yeah. So again, that's a situation where that means your generator has to run 24 hours just to keep this relatively small load on. So those, I think, that's a good point to bring them up. They're often, I think, overlooked because they're, quote, small loads, but they're critical and they run, a lot often.
Yep, and my guess is that you, as controls and technology increases, again, this is something I take from my aircraft training a little bit, is you can do almost anything with the right controls. Probably a generator and a moderate-sized battery pack in an emergency, in a medical situation, could suffice so that the generator is always charging the batteries, and while you're refilling the generator or something, the battery is keeping the load going. So the battery is actually powering the load, but the generator is keeping the battery full, much like it would be in your car.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to do it.
So, all right. So
all right, well, I'm waiting for bated breath for next week's then. Find out the answers to the rest of my questions.
Yeah, let's just hope there are no disasters.
Right. Let's hope there's not a power
before then. Yes.
I'll bring you up my little generator.
There we go.
We'll find a PTO pump for the Mahindra.
Perfect.
Thank you, Russell.
Right.
Thank you, Nora.
Yes, thank you all. Again, this will be online if anyone needs to go back and brush up. And if you have trouble finding those 2 documents, certainly give me a call or shoot me an email and we will get those to you.